Erev Torah B'Tay. Let's continue with PIRKEH Avot, and we'll continue from the place where we stopped last time, which was about a week and a half ago. Okay, so let's continue. It says, Marbe Tzedaka, Marbe Shalom. A person gives a lot of tzedakah. What he does is he makes shalom in the world, and for himself also, for everybody. So what does that mean? That shalom comes from tzedakah, because tzedakah is a kind of chesed, you do for other people. So because of this, right, there's going to be more shalom. It has a great deal of power, to make the world function better. So it brings shalom to the world. Kana Shem Tov, kana le'atzmo. Another interesting thing it says here is that a person who acquires a good name, he acquires it for himself. So what does this mean? That a person, they say, right, we say this also in the prayers on Shabbat. After we finish the Musaf, we say, right, that the best thing to have in this world is to have a good name. Why is that? Because this shows, that a person is righteous. People like him. He's well liked. They say, right, that if they like you down here, that means they like you also up there. So if you have a good name here, that means they also like you there. And so it's something very important to have a good name, because this gives a person the kind of respect, that he needs to live life properly. That everybody likes him, everybody thinks good of him. So having a good name is a big thing. That's another thing. Another, right, this is even the biggest thing, right, which is that a person who acquires divrei Torah, he acquires olam haba. So what does this mean? That the best way to acquire, and it's really the only way to acquire olam haba. How do you become ben olam haba? By learning Torah, right? And if a person does this, he acquires the olam haba. But there's no other way to acquire olam haba. It says in the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan says, the only people who have olam haba is the one who learns Torah or the one who supports the Torah. One or the other, Either one. He's going to have chelek in olam haba. He's going to be ben olam haba. But a person who's not connected with Torah, doesn't learn, doesn't support, so what do you want olam haba for? Because the whole olam haba is from the Torah. If you don't have that, you don't have, what do you have in the world? Just olam hazeh? That's all you got. You got nothing else. So a person has to be attached to the Torah, either learn it or support it, and this way he has olam haba. I'll tell you something interesting about this, which is that there is in the PIRKEH Avot, Kol Yisrael Mishlem Chelek Olam Haba. Right? So that seems to imply that even if you don't learn Torah, you still have olam haba. Right? Kol Yisrael. Everybody's included. So then why does it say over here, only if you learn Torah you acquire olam haba? Which one is it, right? Which one is it? So you know what the answer is? The answer is that there's two types of olam haba. There is one, you have chelek in olam haba. You have something there, you got something there. So like, a person comes to the shul, he has a chair there, he can sit. He's got a chelek there in the community. He's got something there. That's every all Israel, Kol Israel. But ben ha'olam haba, right? That's something else. If you're going to be ben olam haba, you have chelek in olam haba. It's one thing. Your portion. Ben olam haba is a different status. It's like VIP. It's VIP, top notch. Like very respected member. So in olam haba, if you had Torah, they're going to give you a VIP over there. There's going to be a top notch member over there. But if you aren't so much into Torah, you have something there, but you're not VIP. And I'll tell you something, it's not the same thing. You know why? Because they say, my Rabbi, Rabbi used to say, that a person who's ben olam haba, that means he can go anywhere he wants there, he's got permission to go. With this rabbi's class, this shi'ur, Rabbi Akiva, he can go to Rabbi Eliezer, he can go to the Rambam, Rabbeinu Tam, he can go to all the big chachamim and listen to the big chachamim there. He can go anywhere he wants because he's a VIP, he's got a pass to go anywhere. But chelek olam haba, he's got something there, but they don't allow him to go everywhere. It's not the same thing, So That's the difference between a person who's Kol Yisrael Yishol Chelek Olam Haba. That's one thing. And then, but then, right, the person who learned Torah is Ben Olam Haba. That's something else, a different status. That's why, a person has to understand, if you really want to, be strong, in Am Yisrael, Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, what you have to do is to learn Torah or support Torah. Otherwise, what do you got? You don't really have much, I have to tell you, but, just being wealthy and rich and successful, and having a good business, and a good life and big house, and this, right? What is that going to get you in Olam Haba? You can't take these things to Olam Haba. Well, they're not going to take it there. They're not interested in your house. They're not interested in your bank account. They're not interested in all that. All they're interested in is about what you did Torah, what you did in Torah and mitzvot. So that's all they care about. So you want to acquire Olam Haba, you got to do it with Torah. That's the way to do it. That's what he's trying to say. Okay, good. Let's move on a little bit.
By learning Torah, you mean pray Shacharit, Mincha, Arabic, it's also included?
No, tefillah is not Torah. It's two different things, right? Tefillah is one mitzvah. Torah is a different mitzvah, right? Talmud Torah, like you learn Chumash, you learn Mishnah, you learn PIRKEH Avot, you learn Talmud, you learn Halakha. This is Torah.
This doesn't include like Torah.
Huh? Tefillah is not Torah. Tefillah is a different mitzvah. Right, two different things, right? So don't get them mixed up.
I don't know if you teach somebody.
Yeah, of course, so they say that really the truth is that teaching Torah is even better than learning Torah, you're giving to somebody else also. And it's even a higher level. So of course, Kol Shekin, right? Kal V'chomer, right? You teach Torah, it's even better. It's even a higher level. It's not the same person, it's not the same level of person who learned Torah, that's one level, but the one who teaching Torah is on a higher level. That's even higher. Okay, that's, of course. Of course. Okay, let's move on. So he goes on here to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right? What he said. And what does he say about him? Look what it says, right? Im lamata Torah harbe, al tachazik tova le'atzmecha, ki kach notzarta. Look what he says, incredible, right? Even if you learned a lot of Torah, right? You've been learning Torah for a long time. You finished the Chumash, you finished the Tanakh, you did the Mishnayot, you did Talmud, you went Shulchan Aruch, Bet Yosef, bach. You learned all that, right? How long did it take you? I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. I don't know how long it took you to do all that. But al tachazik tova le'atzmecha. What does that mean? Don't think you're a big shot now, thinking, taking credit, and telling people, you know how much I studied? They don't need to know about how much you studied. Don't show off to people. Why? What's the reason why? Don't try to take kavod for your Torah. You know why? Because that's what you were made for. Hashem created you for that. So, like if Hashem created you for that, and you did it, so what? You're such a big shot? No, you just did your job. So what? Just like anybody else who does his job. So what? Don't show off and don't tell people. You know what a chacham I am. You know who I am. You know who I am. You don't know. I'll show you. I'll tell you. You don't have to tell everybody what you are. It's okay. Whatever you did for yourself. You did it for Hashem. Not everybody has to know exactly what you did, how much you learned. But there's one exception to that. You know what they say, right? The Chazal. Sometimes a person is allowed to tell people that he's a chacham. He's a Talmid Chacham. Or that he's a big rabbi, posek, dayan. You know why that is? Sometimes he goes to a place where they don't know who he is. You know what I mean? So, he needs for them to know what he is, because sometimes, he needs to give them what they need to receive from him, as a chacham, as a Talmid Chacham, or to get a job, to take a responsibility there, over there, whatever. So, in order that they should know, that he's a posek, so they can ask him questions in halakha, or they can ask him, learn from him Torah. You should tell them if they don't know, because if they don't know, they just think he's a regular guy, So they say, oh, Chazak Baruch haba, they don't know who he is. He's got a hat, and he's got the, peot and this and that, but they don't know that he's a chacham. So they don't know what to do with this guy, They don't know how to treat him. If that's the case, right, a person needs to tell people he's allowed to do that. But if they already know who you are, right, so if they know, so what are you showing off and telling them, you know what a chacham I am? Okay, so you are, okay, so what? What did you do it for? To get kavod? That's not the reason why you should. That's what he's trying to say, right? So don't think you're such a big shot just because you learn Torah. That's what you were made for. So what? Okay, a little bit more. This is very interesting, right? So it says, Hamishat Talmidim hayu lo Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 Talmidim. These were big Talmidim, So by the way, it's an interesting story with him. You know what they say, right? That Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he wasn't a Chacham all his life. He became a Chacham later on. So what happened? They say, until 40 years old, he wasn't a Chacham. He was a businessman, a business guy. Right. Right? He was a businessman. No, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He was a businessman, right? And then, when he became 40, he started to learn Torah. Then he started getting into Torah. Seriously, serious. You can still do it, by the way. That's the thing, what do you learn from here? Don't say, oh, it's too late, I'm already 40 years old, now I'm going to learn Torah. No, it's not too late. You can still start now. That's what he did, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So they say that he was 40 when he started to learn, and then he learned Torah until 80, for 40 years. Can you imagine? He learned Torah, day and night. It takes a long time to learn the whole Torah. It's not easy, So until 80, he learned the whole Torah, but he lived 120 years. So what did he do for the next 40 years? Like, this is for you, Malkiel. Right? You know what he did, right? They say he taught Torah. He was teaching Torah. So teaching Torah is even on a higher level. First he learned the Torah for 40 years, and then he taught Torah for another 40 years, until he was 120. Passed away at 120. Right? So that's the next step, right? That's the thing what a person's supposed to do. He's supposed to teach Torah also. That's the next step, right? Obviously, if you didn't do that, right, then what did you learn for? Just for yourself? Right? It's not good, no good, right? You have to teach also. Okay, very good. So this is what he was, right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So they say, right, that this big Chacham, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and they say he was very, very big, by the way, He became very gadol, meod. And he had 5 Talmidim, it says. So let's see who they were, right?
Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai.
Okay, so it says, right, Ve'eluhen, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, right? First one was Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, right? They say, by the way, this Chacham, Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus, he was the biggest Gadol Ador, of that generation. Nobody was like him. Nobody knew Torah like him. He was unbelievably Gadol. Like everything he learned, he remembered. And he learned everything in Torah. Nothing. He wasn't missing nothing. That's one, right? That was the first guy. Then it was Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananiah. Next one. Rabbi Yosef HaKohen. Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel. These were his Talmidim. And Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. These were the 5 Talmidim that he had. These were the main guys, right, that he produced. Right? They say, by the way, I'll finish with this. They say here in PIRKEH Avot, even though he had these 5 Talmidim, but they say, if you put Rabbi Eliezer on one side on the scale, right, and all the other Chachamim on the other side of the generation, he would outweigh all of them. Rabbi Eliezer was the biggest one out of all of them, He could knock out everybody. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hurkanus. Right? They also had other names, His name was Rabbi Eliezer Beribi. Right? Beribi means like Gadol Ador, the big Chacham of the generation. Rabbi Eliezer. So they say he could outweigh everybody. But there's another PIRKEH Avot, right? It says here that just the opposite, right? That Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, who was the other Talmid that he had. If you put him on the scale with all the other Chachamim, he would outweigh everybody. So which one is it, right? Is it Rabbi Eliezer outweighs everybody, or Rabbi Elazar ben Arach outweighs everybody? Which one is the emet? Right? But they're both true, right? So they say the Chazal, they're both true be'emet, Rabbi Eliezer was gadol in knowledge of Torah. He knew everything. There wasn't one thing that he didn't learn. He learned every little piece of the Torah, which is an amazing thing. It's an incredible thing. Like, you don't know how big the Torah is. It's like an ocean. You know what I mean? He learned everything. And not only he learned everything, but he didn't forget nothing. Whatever he learned, he remembered. On the other hand, right, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, he wasn't such a big knowledge like this, Rabbi Eliezer. He didn't have that big knowledge. But what he had was that he was Oker Harim. You know what this means? That he was very strong, very sharp, to learn one thing from another, from one sfarah to another. He was a big Chacham, like in Pilpul, right? In derivation. So there are 2 different types of Gedulah, in the Torah. One is to have all the knowledge, to the Bekiut, that he knows every little piece of the Torah from beginning to end. On the other hand, there's somebody, who doesn't know so much, but he's very sharp, so he can take this and derive this, and go from here and jump over there. He can take one thing and give you something else also, a chidush, kharifut, kharif. So, anyway, right, this is the thing. So they're both emet. Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim, right? They were both gedolador, but in a different way. One in bekiut and knowledge, and the other one in charifut, in sharpness. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen. Rabbi Yochanan shomer, עשה הקדוש ברוך הוא לעזור לישראל, לפיכך חיבר להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר אדוני חפץ, למען צדקו יגדיל תורה וידיר.